in this episode of the Critical Oxygen podcast.
Again, there is no magic duration or intensity. It's just whatever feels easy and helps you feel prepared to hop off the bike and go about your day.
Welcome to the Critical Oxygen podcast, where we help you optimize your physiology and maximize your endurance potential. I'm your host, Phil Batterson. I have a PhD in molecular exercise physiology, and I'm the founder of Critical Oxygen, where my mission is to build better endurance athletes through remote education and in-person physiological testing. Today I'm joined by Dave Schell, founder and head coach of Kaizen Endurance, for another episode of Fast Physiology, where we do a succinct dive into a single endurance topic. In today's episode, we're going to explore the question, how to properly cool down and what is the point of a recovery workout. Enjoy. Dave Schell, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, so today we want to kind of follow up the last Fast Physiology episode that was on Critical Oxygen which was how to warm up correctly, with how to cool down correctly and the purpose of recovery intervals and other things like that. This is another sort of topic that I think is steeped in a little bit of misconception and maybe mystery. And it's just one of those things where we can put the record a little bit straighter than it is right now.
There you go. Yeah. I think this is something for me that on the previous podcast, we talked about this idea that there's a universal magic warm-up that everybody should do, like the same duration, the same intensity, what have you. And so I think it's the same thing with cool downs, and maybe even more, even a little bit further in that, I've heard a lot you have to spin so you can flush the lactic acid out of your legs, and things like that, or do a recovery ride to flush that lactic acid, or get a massage, and so, yeah, I think just why are we cooling down, and physiologically what's happening there, and same thing with recovery intervals or recovery rides and so on.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's same principles apply here. So the principle of a warm up was to get your body physiologically ready to do the exercise that was about to come. The point of a cool down is to get your body to come back down to physiological steady state and homeostasis, right? You want to go back to that rest or recovery state as quickly as possible. And, whether it's, I think everybody, right, wants to blame lactate and lactic acid for the burning in their legs, why their legs feel heavy, all this other stuff, because that's just the vernacular that has been used for, it's kind of since the discovery or the inception of lactate, right? And this correlation that lactate equals fatigue, when it really doesn't.
Right.
What I would say is, okay, so let's just take a step back. After you're done exercising, right, your muscles are going to be warmer. Most likely there's going to be some lowering of your muscle acidosis or pH. So you're going to have lower pH, higher acidosis. There's going to be just a lot of other processes that just occurred within your muscle. And if you go from exercising really hard to just stopping, then you're not giving your body time to transition back to what the resting state was. In a resting state, your muscles aren't very warm. There's actually decreased blood flow to them. There's probably more of a balance of metabolic acidosis. And don't get me wrong, 99.9% of the time, your body does a phenomenal job of maintaining both blood acidosis, muscular acidosis, all this sort of stuff. But if you're transitioning from exercise to the resting period, there's still going to be a little bit of holdover, right? You need to process those metabolites in order to, kind of have everything go back to homeostasis. So it's not like flush the lactic acid. It's not do that sort of stuff. We're doing a cool down or recovery interval in order to try to bring our body back down to homeostasis as much as we can. Not to mention, your body, your brain just signaled for you to release a shitload of hormones that are stimulatory in a lot of manners, right? Your heart rate's going to be elevated, right? Your contractility of your heart's going to be elevated. There's going to be changes to where you're diverting blood. So during exercise, you're diverting a lot of blood to the muscles, but you need to bring that back to your visceral organs, right? Your liver, your intestines. You need to reestablish kind of that rest and digest sort of systemic response. So that's really the big point of a cool down, is to bring your body back to homeostasis.
Yeah, and we talked about this a little bit with the warm up one too, and I think just like the point of a warm up is to prepare yourself psychologically or mentally for the work that's about to come, I think the point of a cool down is also to kind of restore to that, like go back to that baseline resting state and like let your heart rate come down, let your breathing come down, like before you hop off the bike if you're on the trainer or the treadmill, so you're not passing out. And I think we also talked, with the warm up, we talked about moxie or muscle oxygen being a good indication. I feel like with the cool down or even with rest intervals, heart rate can be a really good indicator. And it's like low tech. It's like, just if your heart rate comes back down, that's probably a good indication that your body's like settling down back to that baseline state.
Yeah, exactly. And the really interesting thing too is that you're probably not going to go back down to initial resting for a really long time. So if you're initial resting, right, when you're getting onto the bike, you're probably a little jazzed up and stuff. So it might be between 70 and 80. You might not see 70 or 80 again for a few hours.
Right.
Just because it does take your heart rate that long to come back down. But I mean, it might very quickly get back down to 120, then 110, then 100, then 90, right? So yeah, so I think I really like that. I haven't, in all honesty, I haven't really used the Moxie to gauge how quickly I can get SMO2 to kind of come back down to baseline levels. I imagine it would take a decent amount of time, especially like some of the workouts when I get done, my SMO2 is like in a completely rested state can be upwards of like 80%, especially if I totally trash my legs that day.
Yeah, and I guess I would add to that when I say like baseline resting or whatever, I mean like exercise resting, right? And
Yeah.
So for me personally, it might be like 110 beats per minute. So that would be like my recovery heart rate, and so like I can use that as if I'm doing like 3-minute intervals, I can back off and go really easy until it gets back there. And it's interesting using the Moxie, and even recently I've noticed I had to go even easier than I typically did just to get back to that kind of resting pre-interval state.
Yeah, that is, there is a difference between like cool down intensity and interval interval, right? Recovery. And this is something I've kind of been thinking a lot about lately, is like, active versus passive recovery, because essentially during like the warm up, I say almost exclusively passive recovery. Like I tell people to stop pedaling or to walk or to stand still. But then during an actual interval, right, depending whether you're on, whether you're cycling or running, it doesn't really matter. You can do one of two things. You can continue to run or bike, which I think, especially in cycling, not very many people actually ever do full rest. They call full rest like go cycling at like 100 watts, which is still work. So anytime I'm in a room with a triathlete or a cyclist and I tell them full rest, typically they ghost pedal, and I have to tell them no, stop, like do not pedal. And even then they still want to pedal a little bit. But I will say that it seems like active recovery is going to continue to keep that stimulus a little bit longer than the passive recovery. But when we're talking about a cool down, like I don't think it really matters what the intensity is as long as it's easy. So for running, that can be walking. For cycling, you could even get off your trainer and just go for a walk. and that could be your cool down or your recovery. It doesn't have to be sport specific. It just has to be something that is low enough in nature to start to get your body to transition back to the recovery state, and then get you mentally back to that recovery state as well. Because I don't know if you've ever done a workout where it's like you barely have enough time, you crush a workout, and then you immediately just like get done and try to get work done.
Right.
It's like you're still in that elevated state, like almost like twitchy in a sense, when you're going into that next portion of your day.
Right. Yeah, and I think just to go back again, I think really like using the bike as an example, and I think the treadmill is a good example too. So I think like if you're out on a run, then yeah, for your cool down, you kind of stop and walk the last quarter mile or whatever back to your house or wherever you ran from. On the trainer, a lot of times, like you just finished an interval, your heart rate's jacked up, your like blood pressure's up, everything. And so it's like, if you were to just hop off the bike, there's a good chance like you're going to be like disoriented and stuff. And so I think it's really about like you said, even if it's nothing, even if you're just like sitting there, like giving your body a chance to like everything to calm down before you hop off. But I don't think, I think where the misnomer is, or the God, I can't talk today.
The misconception.
Misconception is there's not a lot of like magic happening in that warm up. It's really just like about whatever gets you ready to like hop off or like go back to your day.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because it's a little bit different than the warm up in that regard, is that the cool down is kind of just like, okay, let's just transition back to easy. Right. Yeah. Whereas like you can overdo it on the warm up and other things like that. But with the cool down, it's just like, nope, you just want to keep the muscles contracting, the blood flowing. And I will say that like, by continuing to move during the cool down, that also continues to help facilitate like substrate delivery to the muscle as well. So you can start to replenish if you have adequate carbohydrate, you can start to replenish those glycogen stores, while also keeping the removal of other waste products or byproducts of exercise. You can accelerate that by continuing to move and contract, because just the literal motion of contraction is going to actually move blood in and out of the tissue.
Yeah, and so that was going to be my next question. Is we've heard, I kind of have thoughts on both of these, but we've heard of a recovery run, we've heard of a recovery ride. Mm-hmm. So one, and it sounds like there is there a purpose to it? Like, is it advantageous? But my follow-up question to that would be, with running, I feel like you really can't go easy enough on a recovery run. So it's like, because it is impact. And so I would almost be like, is it going to be better just to go for a walk or something in the case of running?
Yeah. So to answer your first question, absolutely. I think there's benefits to like a recovery workout, right? So whether that's a ride or a run, especially the day after, if you're feeling really tired, it doesn't make sense to get back on the bike or get out on a run and do something that still feels pretty challenging. It depends on where you're at in the season, what phase you're in, other things like that, obviously. But I think that the point of recovery rides and runs is to help facilitate exactly what I was just talking about, getting nutrients to the tissue, because like, yes, there is some blood flow to the working muscle, at rest, but you greatly enhance the blood flow to the working muscle during even very light exercise. So that's even like during like walking, like really, really low intensity walking, or really, really low intensity, cycling. So that's a good opportunity if you're trying to maximize, say, glycogen stores or protein delivery or whatever it is to the muscle. That's a good opportunity to actually pair a workout with proper nutrition, because you're going to push that nutrition into the places that you actually want it to go, as opposed to just kind of rolling the dice. You're not actually rolling the dice, because there's mechanisms within your muscle that stay upregulated in order to get more nutrients to the muscle in times of repair after a workout. But I will say that exercise, even super, super low intensity, that will help facilitate the moving of those nutrients to the muscle. And then in terms of running, I think that for most people, a true recovery run is probably going to be too much. And when I say most people, I'm talking about like the individuals who are doing like a couch to 5K or individuals who are doing a half marathon, and it's not like their job. Like the higher level athletes, like the high schoolers who are training college athletes and pro athletes, or just like really good age groupers, I would say that yes, you could probably get a low enough exercise intensity just by running. But I mean, for me personally right now, like I found that, it's like a high intensity day of running is followed by a very low intensity day of walking or cycling.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to keep blood flow to the muscles, and I'm trying to recover as much as I can between those higher intensity days. And running just degrades my body.
Right.
I don't know about other people. I think it probably degrades other people's bodies as well. But I find that walking gives me the ability to recover enough to then go do more higher intensity stuff in subsequent days.
Yeah, and that's been my experience too. And I'll just say that I think for a lot of people, so you're talking about a very high level athlete, and so let's say that their threshold pace is like 5 minutes per mile or something like that. So they have a lot more area for like intensity distribution, so they can run a lot easier. So like if they're running a 10-minute pace or something like that, that's really easy for them. And you're still going to have that impact, but it's really easy versus a lot of people where their threshold pace might be a 9-minute mile. Well, 10 minutes is still going to be like pretty hard. And like once you get below 10 minutes, like eventually you're just walking anyway.
Yeah.
And so like really thinking about that and like how hard it is metabolically at those paces. So
yeah, no, I agree. And it also depends on how many days, like how much training you've done in the past, especially with running, because if you haven't done very much running, then then it's better, in my opinion, to start conservatively and be like, okay, well, I'm gonna run every other day, something along those lines, and then on the follow up days, if my heart rate can't stay below whatever my zone 2 is while running, then it has to be a walk.
Yeah.
Like or a bike, right? This is where I think runners could greatly benefit from cross training, like cycling, because it's cycling low impact. It's a slightly different movement, so you're stimulating the recruitment of different muscle groups, and from that perspective, it's not 100% sport specific, but it's specific enough that you're still going to get the benefits of like a recovery day, but you're not going to then continue to do the same movement patterns that could then lead to overtraining, injuries, and other things like that.
Yeah, and I guess one last thing or one other thing I'll add to this is I think with running, conditioning your ligaments and tendons is really important too. And so while the bike can be really useful for low impact training, I think walking, at least, you're still like putting some stretch on those tendons and stuff. And so rather than running, it's like you can keep that frequency in the modality almost without I just feel like you can kind of backtrack a little bit if things heal in a shortened state, and then like the next time you run, you're sore again.
Well, I would say what I do for that, and I don't know if this is a perfect practice, but it really helps me, is I have barefoot shoes where I never run in barefoot shoes. I'm not an advocate for running in barefoot shoes, but I walk in barefoot shoes.
Yeah.
So I do my walking. Like today, I'll probably go on the treadmill for a few hours and do some work and stuff, and I'll walk in my barefoot shoes, because that's going to contract different muscles than when I use my trail running shoes, which are slightly different shoes for running up and down the trails in my backyard, to my super cushy road running shoes, which I wear, twice a week, to my super, firm like like plated running shoes, which I wear for like interval workouts.
Yeah.
So the idea is that you're stimulating different muscle groups all the time with all of that different footwear. And by doing that, you're going to actually strengthen different muscles that may not actually be recruited if you're just wearing the same shoe all the time. So if you really want to kind of try to help and support yourself by strengthening your feet and doing those sort of things, I really think it is a good idea to have multiple pairs of shoes that you rotate through. And I got this idea from Aaron Geiser because, it's kind of I think it's his approach, and I really, really like it. And, knock on wood, it seems to have really helped me thus far in my newly added running. So overall, my big takeaway is that a proper cool down doesn't need to be super specific. You just need to do something to start to bring your physiology back down to a steady state or homeostasis. And even though there are more sport specific things you can do, I still think that like adding something in that is like cycling or just walking for a recovery workout can be hugely beneficial for people, on days where they're not doing harder running workouts.
Yep. And I would say my takeaway is that, again, there is no magic duration or intensity. It's just whatever feels easy and helps you feel prepared to like hop off the bike and go about your day.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. So if you guys haven't heard this already, Dave and I are kind of doing these Fast Physiology podcasts as a back and forth between my podcast, Critical Oxygen, and Dave's podcast, Training Babble. So go ahead, jump over to Dave's podcast, Training Babble. There will be a link in the description. Check out, all the topics we cover over there. If you guys have any topics you want us to cover that we haven't covered yet, or just like particular questions, DM us. You can find me on Instagram at Critical02. You can find Dave on Instagram at Kaizen Endurance. You can comment down below if you're on YouTube, and you can leave us a 5-star review if you're on Spotify. It really helps to get more eyes and more ears on the content that we're sharing. So, if you guys are enjoying these, please share it with somebody that you think would also enjoy it. And if you guys have any questions, please let us know. We hope you enjoyed this conversation, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.